Warrior Poets, welcome. It's Mindset Monday, and there's lots of different pieces of mindset. What I'm talking about is I love people, other warrior poets out there. Some of you are watching, and now you love people, whether it's family, friends, neighbors, coworkers, whatever. You love people, and so you're committed to their protection. So we study the art of war together, not because we love violence, but because we hate violence and are ready to use violence to stop violence. Ultimately, the only way to stop somebody with a gun is with a gun. And that's regrettable, but that's just the reality of it. So warrior poets, let's dive right into one piece of building mindset. Before we jump in, just know there's to build a holistic protector, we need to have fitness, we need to have the right guns and gear or knives or whatever else. We need to have good skills so that we know how to use those tools I just mentioned. We need to have great tactics, and then the mother of them all is having the right mindset. And a lot goes into mindset. Hey, are you ready to die? What would you die for? Are you ready to kill? How would you kill? What and a lot of that kind of stuff. How do you handle fear? How do you handle rage? How do you handle stress? What is your emotional and mental health like? How can you respond under chaos and still be able to think clearly? Can you treat war as chess? All that's kind of mindset stuff. Now I'm going to talk about something that I never, ever hear spoken about anywhere else, but it's absolutely critical that we understand it. It's not politically correct, but I'm not a politician, and I just care less and less about political correctness these days. So let's jump in. It's God and gunfighting. Overseas, as a soldier, I would lead Bible studies. In every single of my combat deployments, I would lead Bible studies. And sometimes there'd be like 2-3 dudes just kind of awkwardly sitting around like, anybody else coming? And then all of a sudden a rocket would blow up our truck, one day or night, and then 20-30 dudes would be packed in there. So it was really funny to see that when soldiers were fearful for their lives, everyone got very, very spiritual. I think that's true for people on airplanes as well. You're rabid atheist on the ground, but once you hit turbulence in the air and you're white knuckling it on your seat, you're oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. And it's tongue in cheek. Don't respond with, hey, I'm an atheist and I don't do any of that. Yeah, I get it. It's partially a joke, but mainly it's more of a generality, just to establish that the topic of, is there a God? And what does that God want from me, if there is a God, is very relevant to anyone that's having to put their life on the line in a dangerous occupation. If you haven't thought about that, of like, hey, what happens to you when you die? What is worth dying for? Who should I die for? Is killing right under any circumstance? All of those are philosophical questions, but they're highly theological questions too. And so when somebody says, hey, what does gunfighting have to do with theology? And I'd say everything. It has everything to do with it. And like it or not, if you ever find yourself in a life or death scenario and you haven't tackled the harder theological questions, you're going to have to decide those things right there on the spot, which is generally going to lead you to freezing and not being able to make a decisive plan and carry out an action. It can be very, very difficult. So let's talk about it today. So when dealing with God, I think we have three ultimate options. One is there is no God. This is atheism. Two, there is a God, but this God is like impersonal. It's like a force. It's an energy. Or three, there is a personal God. Not like an energy or something else. Not like a unthinking force, but God has personal-like attributes, meaning God has a mind. God thinks. God plans. God loves. God hates, or something else like that. God has personal type attributes, meaning like personal-ish characteristics. And the impersonal one, God isn't thinking, planning, loving, just kind of like think Star Wars-ish. stuff. That's a little bit more like it. Now, atheism or agnosticism is the smaller part of the population in the United States. I believe last statistic I saw was about 12% identified as either atheistic or agnostic, and most of those 12% were agnostic. Then there's this massive part where the vast majority of the United States is very, very spiritual, but we've rejected Orthodox Christianity, partially because in our age of tolerance, we're ironically very intolerant of anything that our parents believed or anything that's old. C.S. Lewis would call it chronological snobbery. But that's kind of what we are. We want to feel young and progressive, and so the majority of younger folks, millennials, college agers, or people around my age, generally there's this force, there's this spirit, and God is kind of jello. It's undefinable, and this is kind of how the young person thinks. And this will make up the New Age spiritualist, which is just about everyone I run into. Now, as I just kind of logically look at these three options, atheism, impersonal God, or a personal God, I've got difficulties with, actually I can present difficulties with all of them, but the very first one, atheism, I've got some severe difficulties with atheism. Now, I'm a natural cynic. I'm not going to just believe something because someone told me to. Some idea of just here have blind faith of some sort. I can't do that either. I'll need some type of evidence. I need something that makes logical sense to me. So that's kind of the direction I'm coming at all this at. And though it's advantageous to believe in God, so for good fighter mindset, I would never suggest that because it's pragmatic, let's believe it. That's putting the cart before the horse. So let's jump back in. Atheism, there's some difficulties with atheism. First off is, where did all this stuff come from? I mean, you got a universe filled with, stars and, planets and moons, and where did all this come from? This is a lot of stuff. Where did it come from? Now, according to just everything I know about the laws of the universe, nature, science, is something always comes from something else. So what was it that caused the Big Bang? Everything that begins to exist had to have had a cause. The egg came, the chicken came from the egg, came from the chicken, came from the egg, came from the chicken, and on into an infinite regress. The oak tree came from an acorn, came from an oak, and ultimately get far back, but what started it all? And since there can't be a naturalistic explanation, there's not a natural, because ultimately you'd have to defy everything I know about science and say, no, something always just had to have existed. Well, I'm like, now you've defied everything I know about science. So it seems that if you can't find an answer in the natural world, and something always had to have existed, you've jumped into the supernatural world. And since the supernatural world isn't dictated by the rules of nature, now everything that begins to exist had to have a cause. Now in the supernatural didn't begin to exist, so now it doesn't have to have a cause, could have always existed. And that's part of the definition of the supernatural anyway. So that seems a little bit more logically appeasing than just saying, hey, there was nothing and then all of a sudden everything. To me, that makes little sense. A second thing of, even if you get over the idea that, hey, a universe filled with, planets and stars and whatever else just created itself, the notion that it designed itself too, again, contradicts my laws of science. When I look at the laws of thermodynamics, and namely the second one, entropy, chaos leads to greater chaos, not order. Rocks don't turn into people. You don't throw a puzzle up in the air a million times and it all comes down and all falls in pieces. No, it'll just continue to get more and more unraveled. And this is a law of the universe. This is called thermodynamics. Things don't arrange themselves. They'll disorder themselves naturally. And so the idea that we move from no life to very, very sophisticated thinking life is not a very logically coherent thought to me. We can keep going for some more like introspective, existential type things, and I recognize if there is no God, then we're a cosmic accident. It all just kind of made itself, designed itself, and here we are accidentally, and one day we'll be swept away. And I say accidentally, which implies that because it was an accident and nobody made us, and there's no real purpose to your life, there's no ultimate meaning. What's the meaning of life? You're an accident, and one day that accident will be swept away into oblivion. There's no meaning anymore. Love is no longer this transcendent real thing. There's no real love. It's just chemistry. Your biology likes your wife's biology for now, and your biologies may adjust and change, and you'll be out of love, but love isn't a real thing. Morality isn't a real thing except what you make up, what you or society says it is. So if society says, hey, this is morally right, and I'll say, well, to me, it's not morally right. Morality is this to me. And who would you be to say anything different? And you can say, well, then morality is just what we collectively agree upon. And I'll say, well, why be loyal to that agreement? Is loyalty a real moral thing? And if so, who says? Why is that good? Now, if society says it, what if society says rape is good? Why not? And you say, well, that's not fair. I'm like, well, why is fair? Is the animal kingdom fair? Do you see rape in the animal world? Absolutely. Well, aren't we just animals? Yes, we are. Well, then rape is just fine. What about murder? Yeah, the zebra doesn't sue the lion for some morally wrong act. And even if a lion kills a lion, it's not murder, it's just nature. And if we're animals, then murder, kill, rape, that's what I see in nature. And if we're just animals, why not do the same? So morality, if there is no God, morality is just all a fabrication. It's a big game of pretend we made up so we wouldn't tear each other to pieces. So if you can get away with some heinous act, yeah, go ahead. And so that's part of the difficulty in a godless universe. There's no meaning. There's no value. You're no more valuable than a rock. You're both accidents. There's no purpose. There's no love. There's no morality. It's all pointless. And the difficulty as a protector, if all that's true, you just took away all my incentive to sacrifice for a greater good. There is no greater good. You just took away my incentive to die for those I love, because what's love? You just took away my incentive to do what's right, because what's right? You just took away my everything that I'm working toward, because ultimately it's folly. It'll all disappear in the heat death of the universe when everything ceases to exist, and everything that we've done here will mean absolutely nothing. My soul rejects such an idea as atheism, not just because it contradicts what I know about the world around me of origination and design, but also I recognize I believe in my heart there is meaning. I believe that love is a real transcendent thing that's worth dying for. Now, I believe that people are more valuable than rocks, and so I will die for people, and I will love people, and I will sacrifice for people. I believe those things. I believe there is a real right and wrong. See, there can only be an absolute moral law, an objective moral law, if there is a moral lawgiver, a God, someone who says this is right and this is wrong. And to me, that makes a lot more sense, that there must be a God. There's all kinds of great evidences for God's existence, and I just gave you, those are evidences. Now, some people are going to sit as judge and jury of what is evidence, and I've heard lots of atheists or agnostics, especially, I believe in God, but there's no evidence. And the problem is they're deciding what is and isn't evidence. To me, I've just given you great evidence. Typically, I answer these folks with this. I'm like, well, what evidence is there that the house that you're living in was built by a builder? I say, if you go tear up the floors of your house, would you expect to find a builder underneath? As C.S. Lewis presented this argument. Real clever dude. But anyway, of course, you wouldn't expect the builder of the house to be in the walls or the floor of the house. The builder is outside of what they built. And in the same way, the atheist or agnostic will say, hey, there's no evidence in the world or the universe that God exists. In the same way that a builder builds a house, it would be outside that house. Same thing, God would be outside of creation, not part of the creation, and not in that creation. So to me, then they'll say, well, the whole fact that there is a building itself is evidence enough that someone built that building. Now, the fact that there is a universe with design in it is evidence to me that there was a designer and a builder of the universe.